Have you ever wondered how the world's most feared kingpins really ended up? Because what you heard on the news is only a fraction of the story. The hidden truths, the conspiracy theories they never wanted you to know, the disturbing details that were taken to the grave, or that remain locked inside the harshest prisons on earth. 6 men who moved criminal empires with revenues higher than the GDP of entire countries, who built private armies stronger than government forces, who bought whole administrations with suitcases stuffed with cash. 6 brutal endings that will make you question everything you thought you knew about justice, power, and revenge. Pablo Escobar fell on a rooftop in Medellin on December 2, 1993, exactly one day after turning 44. The official version, repeated 1,000 times in documentaries, films, and series, says Colombia's search block, an elite police unit trained specifically to hunt him, cornered him in a safe house in the Los Olivos neighborhood after tracing a phone call he made to his family from a landline. 17 full minutes talking to his son Juan Pablo and his wife Maria Victoria was enough for Colombian and U.S. technicians to triangulate his exact location. Agents surrounded the house, sealed every exit, and shouted for him to surrender. Escobar, wearing jeans and a blue shirt, tried to escape in desperation across the rooftops alongside his most loyal bodyguard, Álvaro de Jesus Agudelo, known as El Limón. Both were taken out by gunfire under the intense afternoon sun. End of the story, they sold you for 30 years. But this is exactly where everything turns murky. Dark, contradictory, filled with questions the authorities never managed to answer convincingly. To this day, 3 completely different theories divide the world, and each one has physical evidence, direct testimony, and documents that support it in unsettling ways. The first theory, defended by his own son for decades, claims the fatal shot to Escobar's right ear came from Escobar himself, using his own pistol. A suicide carefully planned to avoid the ultimate humiliation. Being captured alive, dragged in front of cameras, publicly tried, locked in a cell like an animal. Juan Pablo Escobar now swore it in interviews, documentaries, books, and conferences. My father always told us clearly, looking us straight in the eyes, that if they ever cornered him with no way out, he would shoot himself exactly in the right ear rather than surrender to his enemies. He would rather die by his own hand than give Colombian and U.S. authorities the pleasure of capturing him alive. The official exhumation of Pablo Escobar's body in 2006, supposedly to verify his DNA and shut down wild rumors that he was still alive, seemed to partially support that suicide version. Colombian forensic specialists concluded after analyzing the skull that the bullet path through his head was consistent with a self-inflicted shot, though they admitted they could not completely rule out an external shot due to the deterioration of bone tissue after 13 years underground. But then comes the second version, far more sinister, far more violent, and backed by direct confessions from the men who claimed responsibility. Los Pepes. That terrifying name meant people persecuted by Pablo Escobar, though in reality it was the other way around. A paramilitary group made up of former Medellin cartel hitmen who turned on Escobar, combined with members of the Cali cartel, and secretly supported by sectors of the Colombian police who wanted personal revenge. For months, they terrorized Escobar's inner circle with ruthless precision. Don Berna, one of Los Pepes' main leaders, claimed without hesitation that his own younger brother, Rodolfo Murillo, personally fired the fatal round with an M16 precision rifle from a nearby building window as Escobar ran desperately across the roof searching for an impossible exit. Don Berna even described, down to chilling, intimate detail, how they celebrated that same night at a hidden estate outside Medellin, opening dozens of bottles of the most expensive French wine they could find, specifically the 1948 vintage, because it was Escobar's birth year. Raising toast after toast to the fall of the man who had ordered the elimination of so many of their relatives, friends, partners, and allies. Los Pepes were not symbolic. they were not minor. Over the last 14 months of Escobar's life, they systematically eliminated an average of 6 people per day linked to him according to documented counts. They subjected his lawyers to violent interrogation before taking their lives and leaving the bodies in the street with threatening messages. They kidnapped and eliminated distant relatives who had nothing to do with the trafficking of substances. They burned properties worth millions. They took out loyal hitmen, all with one clear, terrifying message repeated over and over: surrender now or we destroy everything you love before we eliminate you. The third theory, possibly the most controversial and politically explosive, directly involves covert U.S. military operators on Colombian soil that day. According to partially declassified DCEA documents and leaked testimony from retired search block members who spoke anonymously years later, operators from JSOC, the United States Joint Special Operations Command, were physically on the ground on December 2nd. Some accounts claim it was highly trained American snipers who fired the precise shots that ended Escobar and El Limon, not the Colombian officers who publicly took credit. The United States needed to ensure that the man who had openly challenged its power for years would be gone for good that day. No complicated international trial. No problematic extradition where he could negotiate or leak secrets. No chance of escape or rescue. Immediate, final, unquestioned elimination. What nobody disputes, no matter which theory you believe or what mix of them is closest to the truth, is the systematic, devastating role Los Pepes played in completely weakening Escobar during his final months. They squeezed him until he was left with no money, no functioning support network, no safe places to hide, no loyalties he could buy, and no real options for escape or negotiation. When he finally fell that December under Medellin's burning sun, he was no longer the all-powerful Pablo Escobar, once the richest man in Colombia and one of the most powerful criminals in history. He was simply a hunted fugitive, betrayed by almost everyone, alone, desperate, cornered like a wounded animal. Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán has a completely different ending. A cinematic capture followed by a slow-motion psychological breakdown that is still happening right now. His third and final capture took place on January 8, 2016 in Los Mochis, Sinaloa, after Mexican authorities tracked him for months. Before dawn, Mexican Marines stormed a safe house. El Chapo tried to escape through an underground tunnel connected to the city's drainage system, but he was cornered in the filthy sewers. They captured him soaked, beaten, defeated. The photo that went worldwide showed a bruised face and a hollow stare. The strongest theory about his capture points to a devastating internal betrayal. Damaso Lopez, El Licenciado, one of his most trusted men, allegedly leaked his exact location in exchange for U.S. protection. Others argue it was Sean Penn who unintentionally led authorities to him. The actor met El Chapo in October 2015 for an exclusive Rolling Stone interview, and although the meeting was supposedly secret, U.S. intelligence agencies meticulously tracked the movements of every intermediary involved. The DEA and CIA worked closely with Mexico, using advanced satellite technology to triangulate his position for weeks. He was extradited to the United States on January 19, 2017, exactly one day before Donald Trump's inauguration, a politically calculated timing. In July 2019, he was sentenced to life plus 30 years after a trial where 50 witnesses laid out disturbing details of his empire. But the real punishment started afterward. Today, El Chapo is wasting away inside ADX Florence, Colorado, known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. His single cell measures exactly 2.1 by 3.6 meters, barely 7 square meters of reinforced concrete. The furniture is permanently fused to the floor, bed, desk, stool, everything made of cement. He has a stainless steel toilet and sink with no conventional faucets. A narrow window, 106 by 10 centimeters, lets him see only a small strip of sky, positioned to disorient him. The cell is soundproof to prevent any communication with other inmates. He spends 23 hours a day locked inside that tiny space. He gets exactly 1 hour a day in a metal cage in a yard surrounded by 6-meter concrete walls. He never sees other prisoners during that hour. A high-definition camera in the ceiling records every movement 24/7 without interruption. Artificial light never fully shuts off to allow constant monitoring. When he leaves the cell, he does so in leg and hand restraints, cuffs, and a chain around the waist, escorted by multiple armed guards. According to his attorney, Mariel Colon, he is allowed 2 phone calls per month, each exactly 15 minutes. His letters can take up to 10 months to arrive due to exhaustive security reviews. He cannot physically see his wife, Emma Coronel Ispuro. Conjugal and family visits are completely banned. He can only watch educational or religious television in black and white. In October 2024, he wrote in desperation, "It's been more than 7 years since I arrived extradited, and to this day the sun has not touched me." In 2021, he reported severe headaches, progressive memory loss, muscle cramps, stress, and deep depression. "The treatment I receive is cruel and unjust," he wrote in a leaked letter. In 2022, he formally complained of systematic psychological abuse, describing alarming symptoms, frequent auditory hallucinations, time confusion, and devastating mental decline. In May 2025, medical reports said his mental health had completely collapsed. The man who once escaped through a 1,500-meter tunnel fitted with LED lighting is now losing his mind inside 7 square meters. There is no possibility of escape from ADX Florence. A former prison director said, "It's far worse than death." But if we are going to talk honestly about truly mysterious endings, stories surrounded by conspiracy theories that cannot be fully dismissed, no case is more enigmatic, confusing, and deliberately buried than the alleged death of Amado Carrillo Fuentes, universally known as the Lord of the Skies, for his massive fleet of modified Boeing 727s used to move tons of white substance. On July 4th, 1997, U.S. Independence Day, a 42-year-old man using false documents quietly entered the exclusive private Santa Monica Hospital in Polanco, one of the most luxurious and heavily guarded neighborhoods in Mexico City. He did not use his real name at any point. He registered under a completely fabricated identity, Antonio Flores Montes, a successful businessman from Culiacan. His goal was ambitious and desperate at the same time: radically change his face through extensive reconstructive plastic surgery and aggressive liposculpture to remove large amounts of body fat. Everything designed to escape the DEA's relentless pursuit, at a time when his updated photo was distributed across every international airport, every border crossing, every police office across the Americas. A team of 8 highly specialized, extremely well-paid plastic surgeons worked on his body for more than 8 continuous hours. Massive extraction of abdominal and facial fat, a full reconstruction of facial bone structure, a radical alteration of identifying features. According to official medical reports submitted to Mexican authorities just 2 days later, his heart simply could not withstand the extreme stress of such a long procedure and the anesthesia. Sudden cardiac arrest in the final stages, death from severe complications of prolonged general anesthesia, a death certificate issued. Officially, case closed. But this is exactly where the official story collapses and becomes one of the most disturbing, deliberately hidden, unsolved mysteries in the modern history of substance trafficking. 4 months after his alleged death in November 1997, 3 of the 8 plastic surgeons who had operated on Antonio Flores Montes that night were found taken out in different locations across Mexico. Their bodies, after harsh interrogation, had been placed inside 200-liter industrial drums filled with wet concrete that later hardened, a signature method linked to the Juarez cartel. Forensic evidence indicated all three had been interrogated violently for hours before their lives were taken. Two more surgeons from the original team had already been eliminated in the previous months under similar circumstances. Another surgeon was officially missing, without any trace or credible lead. Only one of the 8 survived and fled the country in terror immediately after the 5th was found, taking refuge in the United States and seeking witness protection. Coincidence? The mathematical probability that 7 out of 8 surgeons who operated on one specific patient would all die violently in under 6 months is astronomically low, essentially impossible, unless someone extremely powerful and determined was systematically silencing them one by one to make sure they could never reveal the truth, no matter the pressure, no matter the threat, no matter what was done to them. The strongest alternative theory, widely accepted by serious investigators, journalists specialized in the subject, and independent forensic experts, and supported by multiple documented inconsistencies in official reports, says it was all a carefully engineered operation, that the body officially identified at the Santa Monica morgue was not Amado Carrillo Fuentes. The photographed corpse did not have the distinctive, highly visible black mole Amado had on his lower back, an identifying mark known and documented by DEA agents who had personally interrogated and identified him years earlier. It also did not have the long, visible scar on his left buttock from a gunshot wound he suffered during a confrontation in the 1980s. Official reports claimed the fingerprints matched, but independent forensic specialists who reviewed copies of the documents years later pointed to serious technical inconsistencies in the comparison and certification process. Amado's extended family, strangely with no convincing explanation, did not allow journalists or investigators to photograph the funeral. The casket remained sealed the entire time through the wake and burial. No one outside the immediate family saw the body directly, and the US DEA rushed with unusual speed to publicly confirm through official press statements that the body was definitely Amado Carrillo just 2 days after the reported death. Something extraordinarily fast for complex international forensic work that usually takes weeks, without ever publicly explaining what definitive scientific methods they used to reach that convenient confirmation. Many serious investigators believe, based on consistent circumstantial evidence, that Amado paid tens of millions of dollars in cash to orchestrate a perfect fake death, that he deliberately placed another similar body on that operating table, that the surgeons were eliminated methodically one by one in the months that followed, specifically to ensure they could never reveal the truth under any circumstance, not even under extreme pressure or legal protection deals. Unconfirmed media reports in the years that followed mentioned credible sightings of Amado in Chile and Cuba and Spain. To this day, nobody knows with irrefutable certainty whether Amado Carrillo Fuentes truly died on that operating table in July 1997, or whether he continued living quietly somewhere in the world with a completely new face, an untraceable identity, and the hundreds of millions he had hidden in offshore accounts scattered across tax havens. The perfect ghost of international substance trafficking. The question with no final answer. Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, respectfully nicknamed the chess player for his brilliant strategic mind, long-term planning, and cold, calculated style, played his last deadly match against the relentless U.S. justice system and lost in the cruelest, loneliest, most humiliating way imaginable. As one of the main leaders of the powerful Cali cartel through the golden decades of the 1980s and especially the 1990s, Gilberto and his younger brother Miguel once controlled more than 80% of the white substance successfully sent to the United States and Europe. They moved literal tons every week. But unlike Pablo Escobar, who ruled through spectacular violence, narcissistic exhibitionism, and public terror, Gilberto chose absolute discretion, systematic corruption of institutions, and sophisticated intelligence operations. He was the perfect corporate strategist, the elegant businessman in a $10,000 Italian suit who never personally fired a weapon, yet methodically destroyed rival criminal empires with simple strategic phone calls and perfectly placed million-dollar bribes. Finally captured on June 9, 1995, hiding almost pathetically behind a wooden closet in his luxurious colonial-style mansion in the exclusive Ciudad Jardín neighborhood of Cali. After an anonymous tip revealed his exact location, Gilberto spent the following years in relatively comfortable, corrupt Colombian prisons. Even from a privileged cell, he continued managing legitimate and criminal operations, receiving frequent visits from lawyers and partners, enjoying special treatment purchased through systematic bribery of guards and directors. But everything changed when Colombian President Álvaro Uribe Vélez personally signed his official extradition order in December 2004, under intense and sustained diplomatic pressure from the U.S. government. He was flown to the United States in restraints to face multiple federal charges tied to large-scale trafficking of substances, systematic money laundering of billions, organized criminal conspiracy, and transnational crime. He was sentenced to 30 full years in U.S. federal prison with virtually no real chance of meaningful reduction or early release. U.S. federal prison was nothing like the comfortable, corrupt Colombian facilities he knew. It was harsh, cold, relentless, dehumanizing. No privileges, no bribes that actually worked. No automatic fear and respect attached to his legendary last name the way it did in Colombia. Gilberto aged fast, visibly. His health deteriorated. He developed aggressive lymphoma, devastating cancer of the lymphatic system. Other leaked medical reports also mentioned colon cancer and advanced prostate cancer. The pain became constant. He begged for compassionate release, the federal program that in theory allows terminally ill prisoners to spend their final days with family. It was denied, coldly and repeatedly without any satisfying explanation. On May 31, 2022, at 83 years old, completely alone and forgotten, Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela died in his cell at the federal prison in Butner, North Carolina. Official causes vaguely cited severe complications from lymphoma or a possible massive stroke. His body was returned to Colombia days later in a sealed casket. The same man who had secretly financed Colombian President Ernesto Samper Pizarro's campaign with more than $6 million in cash, delivered in suitcases during clandestine meetings, an earthquake of a scandal historically known as Proceso 8000, which nearly destroyed Colombia's fragile democracy in the 1990s. The same man who had strategically collaborated with the DEA to hand over detailed, verifiable information about Pablo Escobar's locations and operations, calculatingly betraying his mortal rival to weaken him. The same man who moved fleets of commercial planes packed to the ceiling with pure white substance, who washed billions through hundreds of front companies spread across dozens of countries, ended his days as just another inmate, an anonymous number in the U.S. federal prison machine, forgotten by the world, gravely ill, absolutely alone, far from his legendary power, far from his family, far from the billions he had accumulated, confiscated by governments or lost forever in offshore accounts. He died without luxury, without respect, without dignity, with nothing. Griselda Blanco Restrepo, universally feared as the godmother, the queen of the white substance, the Black Widow, the lady of the underworld, returned to her native Colombia only to die in the one way that made grim, poetic sense for someone as violent as she was. Taken out in the streets with the very same method she had perfected decades earlier. In the 1970s, and especially the brutal 1980s, Griselda built one of the most violent and profitable white substance empires in history, based in Miami, Florida. She generated tens of millions of dollars a month in cash, moving tons of high-purity white substance into the United States. But it was not the money that made her a legend. It was her extreme cruelty, her destructive paranoia, and a signature method that terrorized Miami for years. Professional hitmen on motorcycles, 2 precise shots to the head at close range, and then disappearing into traffic. Hundreds, guilty and innocent, were taken out exactly that way under her direct orders during her reign. 3 of her 4 biological sons, all deeply involved from a young age in the family's trafficking operations, were eliminated. Dixon was taken out in Medellin in 2012 in a revenge hit, Uber in 1995 in Colombia, Osvaldo in 1992 also in Colombia. All 3 were eliminated in carefully planned payback tied to their mother's violent past. Only Michael Corleone Blanco remains alive today, named for Griselda's obsession with the Godfather. Griselda served nearly 2 full decades in U.S. federal prison, convicted on major substance trafficking charges, 3 proven killings, and organized criminal conspiracy. In 2004, after 19 years, she was released due to severe heart problems and immediately deported to Colombia. She would never legally set foot on U.S. soil again. She spent her final 8 years living relatively quietly in Medellin, right in the same humble neighborhood where she had grown up as a poor teenager before becoming a criminal legend. On September 3, 2012, a calm, sunny Monday afternoon, Griselda walked along the cobbled streets after buying fresh meat at the local market, as she often did. She was 69. A close friend walked beside her. Her youngest son, Michael, was ahead. Out of nowhere, a young man around 30 pulled up on a motorcycle. He did not hesitate. He drew a 9mm pistol and fired 2 precise shots to Griselda's head from less than 2 meters away. She collapsed instantly on the hot pavement. Her life was taken on the spot before anyone could react. The motorcycle gunman rode away calmly before anyone could even scream or take a photo. The historical irony is brutal and perfectly poetic. The exact same signature method she had ordered hundreds of times against enemies, rivals, traitors, informants, witnesses, even lovers who disappointed her, finally came back for her. An anonymous motorcycle gunman, 2 precise shots, instant disappearance, her own perfected method turned against her. Later investigations strongly suggested it was long-delayed revenge, patient payback from one of the many families she had destroyed over decades. No one was ever arrested. No one was prosecuted. The case remains officially open but frozen without leads. The woman, even Pablo Escobar, was said to genuinely fear and respect, the mentor of smaller criminals before becoming an international legend herself, ended up taken out in Medellin's dusty streets by her own signature method, in the same city where it all began, when she was just a hungry, poor teenager. And finally, we reach the most enigmatic of them all. Khun Sa, born Chang Chi-fu, known across Southeast Asia with reverent fear as the Prince of Death, the king of the forbidden narcotic, the uncrowned ruler of the Golden Triangle, the absolute criminal lord of that legendary region for 4 uninterrupted decades. His story is different from all the others because Khun Sa was never captured by any authority. He never set foot in a U.S. prison. He never faced trial in a Western court. And yet, during his reign, he personally controlled 70% of the world's total trafficking of the forbidden substance. Operating from the remote mountain jungles where Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand meet, an infamous region that produced more narcotic than anywhere else on Earth. From the late violent 1960s through the mid-1990s, Khun Sa commanded massive private armies, at times up to 20,000 armed soldiers equipped with AK-47s, RPG-7 launchers, heavy mortars, .50 caliber machine guns, even surface-to-air missiles used to bring down government helicopters. He built a functioning state within the Burmese state, his own satellite TV station broadcasting propaganda, free primary and secondary schools, equipped hospitals, a full civil and criminal justice system, local police, structured taxes. He controlled hundreds of square kilometers of mountain jungle where poppy was grown on a massive scale to produce high-purity forbidden substance that flooded Southeast Asia, Australia, the United States, and Western Europe for decades. The US government officially offered 1.4 million euros, more than $2 million US, for verifiable information leading to his capture, alive or dead. He was the most intensely hunted substance trafficker in Asia for years, but in 1996, after years of coordinated military pressure from multiple fronts, the reorganized Burmese army with new equipment, Thai special forces crossing borders, sophisticated DEA-backed covert operations, his territorial empire finally began to crumble. His infamous Mong Thai army was defeated in several decisive battles. His ethnic allies strategically abandoned him. His century-old trafficking routes were blocked. And then Khun Sa did something that seemed impossible. He negotiated his surrender directly and personally with Myanmar's military government, the very same junta that was supposedly meant to arrest him and extradite him.